Incredible discovery. A 5-foot anaconda floats in floodwaters. What's inside will shock you. Rain fell in sheets, turning her small-town street into a muddy torrent. Jenna squinted through the downpour, her heart rattling with an alarming rhythm as she wrapped her arms tightly around her children. 10-year-old Marcus clung to her waist, while 5-year-old Lila shivered in her arms, teeth chattering. Just a week ago, they had been planning a picnic. Now, all they had was a small bag bursting with their essential belongings and a desperate fight for survival. She had learned long ago that resilience was required as a single mother. After her husband walked away, Jenna dedicated every ounce of energy to her cramped 2-bedroom home. Days were spent serving tables at Rubia's diner, and nights were swallowed by long hours caring for seniors who needed every ounce of her compassion. But now, the floodwaters surged around her ankles, and doubt clawed at her insides. Could she keep her children safe? Everything in her screamed to retreat, to stay put. But the biting water lapped higher, creeping toward the windows where sunlight had streamed once. "We have to go," she whispered, her voice raw. Panic tightened her throat as she navigated through the murky waters, memories of laughter and warmth taunting her from the past. Just then, her prayers of safety twisted into disbelief. She stumbled upon a towering shadow, and it snapped her to attention. A sleek 5-foot anaconda floated alongside them, its serpentine body glistening in the rain's obscurity. Jenna gasped, eyes wide. This creature alone could swallow her fears whole. But then an eerie calm settled in her chest, an urgency mixed with curiosity igniting a flicker of hope. In the swirling debris accompanying the snake, she noticed something glinting in the murk. Jenna knelt cautiously, her fingers brushing aside filthy remnants until they clutched a handful of ruined, weathered letters. Each parchment unveiled secrets of her family's past, a legacy she had never fully confronted. The letters echoed the words of her grandfather, a proud activist who fought fiercer than any storm for equality. "I never knew this," she murmured, each line igniting an ember of pride, breathing life into her very marrow. Before long, the urgency spiraled. This wasn't merely about survival. With every letter she flashed open, Jenna felt caught between two worlds, the weight of history and the void clawing at her existence. Voices rose along the streets, whispered allegations of her failures. A single mother, struggling to make ends meet, unable to provide the stability her children deserved. Those whispers cut like daggers, and as she inhaled deeply, they settled in her chest like cement. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The weight of revelation pressed on her. Jenna was destined for more than these streets. Yet, with each find dragged from the flood, the currents of anguish threatened to down her hope. Would her grandfather's courage illuminate a path for her? Or would her dedication to raising her children blind her from potential? Before long, a powerful figure emerged from a nearby home, a member of the town's elite. The air shifted, crackling with malice as he approached. "Jenna, I have a favor to ask," he began, and the fear smoldered within her. A direct challenge brewed higher. What would she be willing to sacrifice to honor her family and find her place amidst chaos? The walls around her heart surged as she faced the ultimate decision: integrity and the fight for justice, or the suffocating safety of silence. As she caught her breath in the face of brewing turmoil, the tremors of her awakening intertwined life's fiercest unpredictability with her cautious resolve. Would she muster the strength to protect what mattered most, or would she become another voice drowned out by the flood? The tide was rising. both outside and within. Jenna felt the sharpness of the moment cut through her racing thoughts as the man loomed closer. Familiar hatred brewed within her. His mere presence was a reminder of countless times she had felt powerless. "Stand straight," she commanded herself, clenching the letters in her hand like talismans, harbingers of truth and resilience. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside. The man, Harold Brandt, was a shark in a tailored suit. His reputation for ruthless dealings preceded him. She had heard the whispers, how he exploited disasters for profits. The Anaconda, a symbol of her chaotic thoughts, glided by, a stark reminder that she needed to confront the creature in front of her as fiercely as she battled her internal fears. Harold adjusted his stance, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I just need a small favor. You know how the town appreciates how shall I say, community-oriented individuals such as yourself." His words dripped with condescension, but Jenna stood her ground. "What do you mean by that?" "Favors," he repeated, his gaze darting to the horizon where the floodwaters lurked. "You've got a following among the locals, and I need someone to vouch for a project I'm launching. Your endorsement would make it seem more palatable." Panic raced through her veins. The weight of his proposition sat heavily in the air, an ultimatum cloaked in charm. Endorse his project, whatever it was, and maintain the blissful ignorance that paid the bills, or tell him off and risk her tenuous grasp on her livelihood. It felt like a wave threatening to engulf her. "What's in it for you?" she asked, eyes narrowing. Clenching her jaw, she felt the letter's smooth edges digging into her palm, grounding her in the chaos. She had to stall for time. His words felt like a noose tightening around her neck. He chuckled, his contempt seeping through. "What's in it for you is the damning reality of being relevant within this town. You want to raise your kids amongst the elite? Then choose to play nice." His words struck in errant waves. Guilt intermingled with her longing. How could she raise her children in this environment and teach them the values her grandfather held dear? The legacy she touched through those letters was one of altruism, justice, and empathy, everything Harold stood against. "So my choice is to endorse what I know is wrong just to gain approval?" Her heart raced, breathing quickening. "Do you really think I would sell my soul for your favor?" "Isn't that what everyone does, Jenna?" He leaned closer, and she recoiled, his breath heavy with the scent of arrogance. "Here's the truth. You're desperate, and you know it. Your kids need stability. All I'm offering is a chance to keep your head above water." In that moment, Jenna realized this wasn't merely a conversation. It was a trial of her character. Would she become what the floodwaters threatened to drown, a victim drowning in silence? Or would she rise, fueled by the echoes of courage swirling in the letters? "Let me think about it," she replied, taking a step back, daring to reclaim her space. Fear knotted in her chest. She was not yet ready to forge a path to resistance. However, seeds had been planted. As Harold turned his back, she felt the world around her shift. A reckoning had begun, rooted in the very blood that coursed through her veins. With her heart hammering against her chest, Jenna glanced at the letters once more. They whispered possibilities of strength she had yet to fully comprehend, urging her to define her future. But lurking in the shadows, the whispers and sightings of the past left intricate trails of insecurity. If only she could find a way to translate this newfound knowledge into action, to balance motherhood and her emerging voice without compromising her integrity. With renewed determination, Jenna pivoted toward her children, squaring her shoulders against the sloshing water. They were not alone. They were woven into a narrative of fight and resilience. And as she held on to the memory of her grandfather's legacy, a tangible reminder of what she could be, the floodwaters suddenly swirled violently around her ankles once again. The heavy determination inside her grew. Was she ready to confront this beast within and without once more? The moment was approaching fast, and she could sense the currents shifting. She was about to decide whose side she was truly on. Jenna stood in the relentless swell of uncertainty, feeling the currents pull at her resolve. With each passing moment, the weight of Harold's words resonated deeper within her. Unease clawed at the edges of her mind, taunting her with images of her children's futures, her failure to protect their innocence, to secure for them a life grounded in honesty rather than deceit. As she walked away from Harold, her determination hardened. This was a pivotal moment, an unmistakable fork in her path. She had sneered at the profits those like him reaped from others' misfortunes. Now it was her opportunity to confront the source of those injustices, the very personification of avarice that lurked in the shadows of her town. Her thoughts churned as she reached her home. The familiar smell of her kids' laughter filled the air, mingling with the scent of damp earth that clung to their clothes after playing in the rain. Their carefree delight was palpable, a stark contrast to her inner turmoil. She took a moment to watch them, to breathe in the simplicity of their joy. It refueled her in a way she hadn't anticipated. But an unease lingered. How could she still offer them a secure life when their foundation felt so suddenly shifting beneath her? "Mom," a soft voice called, and her youngest daughter Lily rushed toward her with muddy hands outstretched. The moment reminded Jenna of her role not just as a provider, but as a model for strength and moral clarity. Regardless of what Harold would throw at her next, she knew she had to be firm against the tide, both for her children and for herself. "Let's clean up," she said softly, enveloping Lily in a warm hug and guiding them both into the house. As they washed up, Jenna's mind began to race with plans. Perhaps there was a way to gather support from others, to reach deeper into the community and get a sense of what people truly needed. Understanding came from uniting with those who shared her values and beliefs, reminding herself that she could build something meaningful from the ground up. With the children settled for their afternoon nap, she found herself alone in the living room, surrounded by her grandfather's letters. One in particular caught her eye, fluttering partially opened. She retrieved it, the familiar reassuring weight grounding her fears. As she read, a subtle clarity emerged from the tangle of her thoughts. His words echoed the importance of vigilance, of standing up against those who exploited the vulnerable. She carefully penned a response to Harold in her mind, coupling assertiveness with a refusal to back down. What could she say that would make him reconsider his predatory tactics? Building her voice, she envisioned framing her stance not just as opposition, but as a call to protect the town she loved. Even before she set the ink to paper, it became clear her speech would resonate deeply, not as an affront, but as an invitation to reflect on shared values, values that could empower rather than marginalize. Determined to make her voice heard and ignite a greater discussion in the town, she prepared for her confrontation with Harold once more. The realization struck her. What if this encounter was not just a negotiation, but a pivotal lesson on the profound impact her life choices could have? Jenna straightened her back, picturing herself in the coming test of her resolve, unmarred by fear. With the urgency of the floodwaters still pressing upon her thoughts, she reached for her phone. She needed to speak with her friends, the ones who would understand her motives, who could help her formulate a plan with purpose. As she stared at their names on the screen, she pondered the weight of this moment. It was not merely about confronting Harold. Now it was a chance to bring echoes of change into the very core of her hometown. The looming battle was no longer against one man. It was against the system that could be dismantled piece by piece. As she pressed call, Jenna felt the pulse of resilience surge, marking the leap into action. But uncertainty flickered at the edges of her mind. What if she faltered? The phone rang, and with each heartbeat, the question loomed larger. Would she have the courage to stand firm in her convictions, or would she find herself swept away, much like the waters raging outside? The phone call connected, and Jenna's heart raced as she heard her friend Sam's familiar voice. "Hey, Jenna, what's going on?" "Sam, I need to talk to you. It's important," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sure, what's up?" Jenna quickly summarized her encounter with Harold, the unease that accompanied it, and her growing need for action. She couldn't hide the tremor in her voice, a signal of the conflict she was grappling with. The divide between her instinct to protect her children and the urgency to challenge a man capable of undermining everything she held dear. "I believe he's exploiting our town," she added, "and I can't just sit idly by anymore." "Sounds serious. What are you thinking?" Sam asked, his tone shifting to one of concern. "I want to confront him directly, but I can't do this alone. I need our friends to rally around a plan. We could craft a message together, one that highlights what's wrong, what has to change." "Sounds like we have to move fast then. I can help gather some of us to brainstorm this. We should have our voices heard." As they spoke, Jenna felt a surge of determination solidifying in her chest. Rallying her friends wasn't merely a tactic. It was her stepping stone, a deliberate choice to shape the narrative rather than be defined by it. "Let's meet tonight," she suggested, the urgency inflating her sense of purpose. "Let's be ready to push back against him." "Got it."
"I'll call everyone," Sam replied. "You focus on what you want to say." With the call ended, Jenna sat in the living room, her mind dancing with thoughts. She envisioned the meeting, faces illuminated with mutual resolve, ideas sparking like static electricity in the air. This wasn't merely an exercise in confrontation. It was a reclamation of their narrative, a collective assertion of integrity in opposition to greed. But self-doubt rumbled beneath the surface. What if her words failed to resonate? What if they were dismissed as mere noise? She knew the investment she was making in this confrontation was monumental, yet not without risk. She clenched her fists, willing herself to be bold. In the eternal twilight of psychological preparation, she sifted through the letters once more, desperate for wisdom. Her grandfather's words propelled her forward. It was time to articulate her values clearly, to frame her challenge in a way Harold could not dismiss. As dusk settled, Jenna took a deep breath, letting the calm wash over her. She wrote notes for her speech, each line emerging with clarity and conviction. Confronting Harold would be about more than just a personal battle against one person. It was a spirited defense of her family's future. There would be no more hiding in the shadows. The evening meeting came swiftly. Friends gathered around her living room, sharing ideas, building upon each other's thoughts. The air was electric with possibility, yet Jenna couldn't help but feel the weight of leadership contesting her resolve. "Are we really prepared for this?" she asked the group, her voice carrying the tremor of uncertainty. "Absolutely," Sam replied, looking her straight in the eye. "If anyone can stand against him, it's you, Jenna. You inspire us, and we won't back down." In that moment, Jenna realized she had unwittingly assumed a role she had only just begun to define. It was not just about confronting Harold anymore. It was becoming a beacon of courage in a fragile world. Yet, even as they strategized, Jenna felt an inherent tug of tension within her. The fear of failure loomed. What if her newfound strength didn't hold in the face of Harold's dismissive arrogance? The thought prickled at her mind, gnawing away at her determination. With the meeting winding down, Jenna felt a surge of adrenaline, but the heartbeat of doubt lingered just below the surface. "How do I ensure I'm not just fighting a battle of words?" she thought, the urgency of the upcoming confrontation weighing heavy on her shoulders. As everyone filed out, anticipation rippled in the air. The impending confrontation with Harold loomed large. The true test of her resolve awaited. What would she uncover about herself when faced with the harsh reality of his glaring intentions? With her strength gathering like a storm at sea, it was now time to put everything on the line. Tomorrow would bring more than just a fight. It would be the moment she would either realize her potential or falter under the pressure of her own aspirations.
She needed to be ready. Would she trust herself enough to bid farewell to self-doubt? The next morning dawned with a sense of urgency that enveloped Jenna like a heavy fog. She woke up with a stomach knotted tight, every thought spiraling back to Harold's intentions and the confrontation ahead. It felt less like a battle and more like a reckoning with her own vulnerability. The stakes had morphed into something personal, transforming her sense of self into a battleground of fears and aspirations. She had spent the rest of the night going over her notes, editing, refining, trying to anchor her thoughts with focus. Yet the simpler drafts felt more honest. As she moved through her morning routine, every mundane task, a shower, breakfast, arranging her kids' lunchboxes, was punctuated by this consuming weight of anticipation. Would her call to action resonate? Would she falter when faced with Harold's intimidation? With each minute that ticked by, doubt clawed at her. Rather than rush through the day, she allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply, inhaling the sense of fresh coffee but exhaling the tension of what lay ahead. Today was her chance not only to speak, but to be heard, a distinction she was learning to appreciate. After dropping off her children at school, she faced the mirror for a moment longer than usual. "Trust yourself," she whispered, absorbing the reminder as her resolve solidified. Machinations of the situation had to remain dispassionate in order for her voice to carry weight. She envisioned the meeting with Harold, unable to shake the ghost of doubt colorizing the potential outcomes. What if her carefully chosen words fell flat? What if he twisted her intentions, condescendingly reducing her to a mere annoyance? Driving to the venue where the confrontation would take place, Jenna felt an exhilarating shiver run down her spine. The air pulsed with trepidation, but it spurred her on. She was on the verge of something transformative. Arguably the most significant part of her morning was simply choosing to confront instability instead of retreating. It was the first time in too long she recognized her own agency. It felt empowering and unsettling all at once. She arrived early, utilizing the quiet moments to observe the venue. A quaint, familiar space, it contrasted sharply against her turmoil. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle, a fitting arena for the confrontation that would transcend physical space into the context of spirit. Waiting in quiet anticipation, she rehearsed her words, the framework she had painstakingly built around vulnerability and strength. "You have a right to your voice. Don't lose it," she reminded herself, drawing quiet confidence from the thought. But the moment of truth, the confrontation with Harold, remained a tightening knot in her stomach, the feared unknown. When the door swung open, Harold entered with a swagger that felt like a slap to the face, confidence exuding from his posture. Jenna's heart raced, but she stood her ground. Here was the colossus she had presumed indomitable, a man whose ego dwarfed any concern she'd voiced. Yet, as his eyes met hers, a curious flicker ignited within her, a glimpse of the power she held, not just as a voice against him, but as a challenger of circumstances. The initial pleasantries passed, but their essence felt superficial, thinly veiled by an undercurrent of insincere camaraderie. Jenna couldn't let herself hesitate. The time had come, more than to just speak. It was about living her convictions. "Harold," she began, her voice surprising her with its steadiness amidst the turmoil churning within. She noticed the slight arch of his brow, assessing, calculating. A part of her felt like screaming into the abyss of her self-doubt, but she couldn't allow fear to unduly influence her. She needed to convince him, and herself, that her words would matter. "What I'm about to say is not merely for the here and now. It's about the legacy we build. Exploiting our town threatens the very fabric of what we call home." Her voice gained momentum, an urgency punctuating each statement, fueled by everything she had wrestled with over the past weeks. As she spoke, she felt the pulse of her heart echoing in her ears. Would she finally unveil the truth lurking beneath the bravado of this encounter? Was she beginning to discover the depths of her own convictions, or merely facing another wave of doubt waiting to crash down? The answer lay in the silence that enveloped them, and the calculated glint in Harold's eyes told her this was a far more intricate dialogue than mere words. The air hung heavy with unsaid assertions, and Jenna sensed that they were both teetering on the edge of something yet undiscovered. In that charged moment, she questioned the essence of her resolve. Would she maintain her foundation against the storm brewing around them? The true confrontation was only beginning, and the gravity of the situation loomed like a dark cloud overhead. But the question remained. Was she ready to wage this war of ideals, or would the very weight of her challenge bring her crashing down? She would soon find out, as the true battle was not with Harold, but within herself. What else lay in wait beneath the surface, poised to be unveiled in a confrontation that had only just begun? Jenna's words hung in the air, vibrating with a force that surprised even her. Harold, his demeanor shifting from amused curiosity to veiled irritation, leaned back in his chair, adopting an almost condescending posture. The power dynamics, once so skewed in his favor, felt teetering. For the first time, she noted an unease flicker across his face. Legacy?
Huh, he scoffed, the disdain spilling into his tone. You're not really serious, are you? Our town is a business opportunity, Jenna. You don't build a legacy by clinging to nostalgia. As his words sliced through the atmosphere like broken glass, Jenna felt the sting of frustration hit her squarely in the chest. This was why she had come. She had anticipated his dismissal, yet the reality of facing his arrogance was distinctly more jarring than any rehearsed confrontation. How can you equate progress with exploitation? Jenna fired back, her voice gaining an edge of indignation. The growing momentum within her sparked a fire she hadn't fully realized existed. Growth does not warrant the destruction of our roots. You speak of business, but what about community? You're not just jeopardizing a town, you're dismissing the very people who call it home. The room crackled with tension as Harold's brows knitted together, his brazen confidence beginning to show cracks. Jenna recognized the fear behind his facade. It mirrored her own, stretched thin and fraying. In polite society, one did not challenge with such passion, but in this moment, she embraced her instincts. She was not simply a cog in a wheel, she was the engine driving forward. I thought you, of all people, would understand, he replied, his voice losing some bravado, edging into a defensive realm. This is about survival, Jenna. Your ideals are quaint, but you have to be pragmatic. Then what gives you the right to define survival? She countered, feeling herself lean forward, captivated by the challenge. The confrontation was so much more than what lay between them. In this moment, they were not just two figures engrossed in a debate. They were manifestations of conflicting worldviews, tethered to their beliefs. As she watched him struggle, she realized she was standing squarely in her own power. This was not merely a conflict with Harold, but a confrontation with every ounce of self-doubt that had shadowed her life up to this point. Let's break this down. How does exploiting our home ensure its longevity? She pressed, her heart racing with conviction. Each question unleashed another level of clarity, and as Harold floundered with his response, Jenna felt the rush of anticipation fueling her resolve. I am not here to cozy up to your sense of entitlement, she continued, the words spilling from her with an authenticity that lifted her spirit. I refuse to believe a legacy can be built on the ashes of our community. Harold inhaled sharply, the silence palpable as he processed her assertions. Jenna could see the gears turning within him. This was a moment of reckoning, not just for her, but for him as well. Would he double down on his ideology, or would he begin to question his claims? In that heartbeat of stillness, Jenna understood what her next step had to be. She needed to reveal her deeper convictions, a thread of identity that had lain dormant until this confrontation resurrected it. Harold,
We both know that progress should uplift, not obliterate. It is in our hands to ensure that our future aligns with our values. I refuse to allow your vision to drown out the voices of those who care about this town. The weight in the room shifted again, now grounded in a shared awareness. She was not just fighting for her stance, but for something far more significant. This confrontation was her crucible, forging the woman she had long aspired to be. As the tension crescendoed, Jenna's heart raced with the thrilling pulse of possibility. But as soon as she sensed the shift, a flicker of alarm rippled through her. Harold's assuredness had not vanished entirely. He still clutched a few tools of manipulation. What other tactics might he employ to dismantle her argument? The crossroads they faced felt charged with unspoken potential, but she was acutely aware that this was just the beginning. As if sensing her determination, his expression morphed into a predatory smile. "You think you can win this? You don't know what you're up against yet," he warned, an ominous edge creeping into his tone. The battle lines had been drawn, and Jenna felt a surge of adrenaline course through her veins. The pivotal choice remained. Would she stand firm in her newfound power, or would fear return to claw at her resolve? The door of her self-awareness had been flung wide open, and she was about to discover just how far she was willing to push against the tide. The stakes just escalated, and the next move in this intricate dance of power and persuasion remained uncharted territory. How much of herself was she prepared to risk in this heightened confrontation? A reckoning loomed on the horizon, and the outcome would define not only her principles, but possibly the future she envisioned for their community. Jenna's pulse pounded in her ears as she stared at Harold, the weight of his condescension lingering like a specter in the room. With every question, every pointed glance, she felt a tight coil of anxiety twist around her. Yet beneath it lay an unfamiliar steadiness, a sense of purpose. "You think you can intimidate me with your bravado?" She took a deep breath, centering herself. "You don't understand what's at stake here. I don't want to fight you, Harold. I want you to see reality, the one you've blinded yourself to." His smirk didn't waver, but there was a flicker in his eyes that suggested her words had pierced through his shield. Yet Jenna knew he wouldn't surrender without a fight. This wasn't just a battle for her community. It was a fight for her own identity, for the person she had been reluctant to acknowledge, a woman of conviction, unwilling to back down. "Reality?" he echoed, disdain layering his tone like paint on a canvas. "What you call reality is just nostalgia clouding your judgment. People want jobs, opportunities, not some quaint memory of how things used to be. You're idealistic." "Ideals are the backbone of progress," Jenna shot back, her voice gaining momentum. "You think power is in profit alone, but profit without the people is hollow. I refuse to accept that a future built on greed is the only path. If we lose sight of who we are, we lose everything." She could see the wheels turning in his head, and the calculating flicker made her pulse race. Was he processing her words or merely planning his next retort? The pause in their exchange felt electric, a potential energy waiting to be unleashed. Jenna decided to push further, to probe not just Harold's ideas, but the very foundation beneath them. "Tell me, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? One of machines and concrete, or one that shows growth can emerge from respecting our history?" At this, she saw his facade crack a little more. It was barely perceptible, but she felt it. A moment of hesitance. His dismissal of her passion was now accompanied by flashes of recognition that he had perhaps underestimated her. "I'm not here to convince you to embrace some fairy tale," he fumed, his tone darkening. "This is business. You want to make a change? Then put your money where your mouth is." Jenna's mind raced. There it was, the challenge she needed. His comments were taunts, but they were also an opening, a chance to leverage her voice to activate action, to take tangible steps toward creating her vision. "What if I did?" she mused aloud, her voice even, threading her next words cautiously. "What if I began to mobilize the community to invest in sustainable practices? I'm not just talking about charity. I mean a real initiative that gives people jobs and revitalizes our town without sacrificing it." Harold straightened, surprise flitting across his face. "You think that's possible, with your little charm and goodwill?" "I think it's worth a shot," Jenna said, unable to suppress the excitement bubbling within her. "What's the worst that could happen? We rise together or we fail trying. At least it's not built on the backs of the vulnerable." As her imagination took flight, a sense of agency swelled inside her. The two were still locked in combat, his disbelief against her burgeoning conviction, but for the first time had shifted from a defensive stance into a space of potential creation. Would she dare to put herself out there? Harold's expression faltered, frustration mounting as he fought back against the tides of her optimism. Unwavering, Jenna pressed forward, her resolve summoned by the conditions of their duel. But just as she began to envision a path forward, Harold's expression darkened again, and his voice dipped into a low threat. "You really think that's enough? People like you don't last long. I'll take this town and let it drown in foolish ideals if I must." A tremor raced through her. Anger ignited, but alongside it, fear crept in. The kinds of fear she had stifled for too long. Would her ideals be enough to protect her?
"I'm ready to risk it," she declared, fierceness anchoring her words. "What about you? Are you ready to risk losing sight of what makes this place truly worth fighting for?" His eyes narrowed, the power struggle morphing into an intimate contest of wills. The stakes were at an all-time high, and Jenna sensed they were both on the brink of a transformation, one that could redefine not just their personal ambitions, but the essence of the town itself. In that moment, Jenna felt every pulse of uncertainty fade, replaced by clarity. There were no more games. She was ready to declare her stake in the world. But as the ground shifted beneath them, a sudden thought struck her. What unseen challenges lay ahead, lurking just beneath the surface of their confrontation? What were the consequences of her bold move, and how could they turn the tide in her favor? The fabric of her resolve had woven tightly, but the path forward remained perilous. Jenna was ready to discover just how formidable her voice could be in this confrontation. What allies would join her cause, and what foes would emerge from the shadows. As the tension simmered in the air, she sensed this was only the prelude to a far greater test. Jenna stepped back, uncertain of the immediate future, yet fully aware that something fundamental had shifted within her. The confrontation, once a source of trepidation, had transformed into a catalyst for clarity. She needed a strategy, a way to harness the momentum she had generated despite Harold's cynical barbs. As she left the tense atmosphere of the meeting room, Jenna took a deep breath outside, the crisp air sharpening her focus. She couldn't fight this battle alone. She would need allies who shared her vision and drive. But where would she find them? She contemplated the people she had met in her community over the years, the ones who had repeatedly voiced concerns about the direction the town was heading. Their stories and struggles echoed in her mind, waiting to be transformed into action. Deciding to gather her thoughts, Jenna sought out her favorite cafe, a cozy nook filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee that felt like home. It was time for an informal forum, a place to share ideas, ground truths, and stir the embers of possibility. Once seated at a sunlit table, she pulled out her notebook. She scribbled key words: opportunity, sustainability, unity, nudging her mind to formulate a vision. Recalling the names of a few friends and acquaintances who were equally disillusioned with the current state of affairs, she made a short list on the page.
Each name represented a potential ally, but more than that, they symbolized a piece of her own identity she was eager to reassemble, a community of thinkers, dreamers, and doers. Her thoughts raced as she imagined a gathering filled with brainstorming sessions and passionate discussions, igniting sparks of hope and action. This could be the platform she needed to rally support, the stage upon which she could expose Harold's false dichotomy of profit versus people. Jenna's resolve solidified as she dialed the first number on her list, Maya, a local environmentalist who had been outspoken about sustainable practices. To her relief, Maya answered almost immediately, her voice warm yet inquisitive. After sharing her recent confrontation with Harold, Jenna felt the energy in the conversation shift, drawing Maya closer into the cause. "I've always believed change starts from the ground up," Maya said, enthusiasm brimming in her tone. "Count me in, Jenna. We can start by mapping out the skills in our community. It's about leveraging what we have." As they spoke, Jenna felt the burden of uncertainty begin to lift. With Maya's expertise, they could devise a concrete plan that resonated with the townsfolk. Together, they discussed forming workshops to communicate ideas about sustainable practices that paid respect to the history of their community while embracing the future. Once the call ended, Jenna continued to make contact, each conversation threading new possibilities into her evolving web of influence. The more she shared her ideas, the more her conviction blossomed. Each positive response rekindled a fire in her heart, the drive to turn her vision into something tangible. But amidst the optimism, doubt persisted like a shadow. What if Harold countered her every move? What if he infiltrated their plans or discredited their efforts? Jenna realized she needed to be strategic. The conversations with her allies were all well and good, but they hadn't yet directly addressed Harold's influence. She needed a plan that was as much about persuasion as it was about action. Sitting there, contemplating her next steps, Jenna felt the looming question: how could she counter the deep-seated power dynamics Harold wielded? Just then, her phone buzzed with a new text. It was from Maya, and it read, "Let's meet up soon and bring in some more voices. We can build something grand together." Jenna's heart raced. This was it, her moment to rise, not just as an individual, but as an architect of change. She could no longer only confront Harold. Now she had to outmaneuver him by consolidating her network and crafting a strategy that could weather his tactics. As the sparks of determination ignited within her, Jenna realized the real battle was just beginning. What new alliances could she foster, and how far might they stretch before succumbing to the pressure of opposition? With her resolve steeling against uncertainty, Jenna sat back in her chair. She was ready to don the armor of collaboration and venture into the arena of change. But the paths ahead were winding, and she sensed the shadows still lurking, waiting to capitalize on her ambitions. What surprising revelations might the journey bring? Jenna's thoughts raced as she exited the cafe, the newfound resolve coursing through her veins like adrenaline. She was juggling multiple ideas, maneuvering through the fabric of relationships that began to weave together. The sun had dipped slightly lower in the sky, casting playful shadows along the street as she walked, invigorated by the possibilities that lay ahead. The first step was clear, formulating a coherent strategy. She understood that the strength of her movement would rely not just on numbers, but on the clarity of their vision and the trust they built. Her mind drifted back to her conversations with Maya. Inclusive dialogues were key, but there was an essential piece missing. They needed a defining statement, a unifying goal that transcended individual passions and solidified their collective cause. Jenna knew she couldn't draft this alone. With a renewed sense of purpose, she decided to reach out to others. She dialed Lynn, the local artist known for her vibrant murals that transformed blank walls into canvases of community voices. Lynn was deeply committed to social issues and had a knack for storytelling through her art. Perhaps through her creativity, they could find a captivating way to express their cause. "Hey Lynn, it's Jenna," she said when the line connected.
her voice steady though the excitement danced just beneath her surface. "I have an idea brewing and I'd love your input. It involves art and community vision." "I'm intrigued," Lynn responded, her tone already sparking with creative enthusiasm. "Tell me more." As Jenna spoke, she felt a rush of clarity wash over her. They could work together to create a visual campaign that encapsulated their mission, a piece that would serve as a rallying cry for the community while doubling as an invitation for engagement. The two brainstormed, easily latching on to the concept of roots and wings, a metaphor illustrating the town's heritage while simultaneously pushing toward a sustainable future. Lynn was especially inspired by the imagery of trees, whose expansive roots nurtured the earth below while their branches reached for the sky. It spoke to Jenna as both a personal aspiration and a collective ambition, perfectly capturing what they wanted to achieve. Once the call concluded, Jenna felt a fresh surge of energy. With each ally she contacted, she could feel the nucleus of a movement forming. She arranged meetings, often seated in that same cafe, each time sketching out ideas, throwing concepts into the air, and allowing them to settle in a way that felt right. However, with blurred lines of creativity and excitement came the gnawing anxiety of potential backlash. Harold wasn't just a frustrated adversary. He embodied a system that was comfortable in its dominance. The deeper Jenna ventured into her plans, the more aware she became of his capacity to strike when least expected. How could a visual campaign stand up to a deceptive narrative? In restless moments after her meetings, Jenna's mind circled back to Harold's influence, contemplating his moves like pieces on a chessboard. If she wanted to counter his tactics effectively, she had to anticipate his approach. What were his strengths? Where were his vulnerabilities? It dawned on her that all his assertions thrived on fear. Fear of losing profits, fear of change, fear of the unknown. It was then that a defining thought struck her. If Harold was orchestrating narratives built on fear, perhaps it was time for her to confront him directly. Not in a chaotic battle, but with a composed and well-organized presentation of their vision. She could show the community what united purpose looked like, stripping away the layers of fear he used to paralyze the town. As Jenna formulated this approach, a shiver of thrill mixed with apprehension coursed through her. Would this strategy solidify her place at the forefront, or would it paint a target on her back? But this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the collective dream that was rapidly taking shape. Shifting in her seat, Jenna allowed the plans to settle before her. She could feel the weight of ambition pressing upon her, along with the exhilarating prospect of unveiling their artwork. The stage was set, and all she needed was the courage to position herself as a central player. But as evening approached, the reality of what lay ahead loomed larger. Would the community embrace her vision? Would they rally together, or would they falter under the pressure of Harold's dominance? In the quiet stillness following her revelation, Jenna leaned back in her chair. She was ready to cross this threshold, yet the stakes felt colossal, and she could almost hear Harold's voice echoing in her mind. The confrontation would come soon, and she needed more than just a driving idea. She needed a solid plan that could withstand his influence. What tools and tactics could she employ to ensure it wouldn't just be a momentary uprising, but a lasting change? The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a gentle warmth around Jenna's small gathering. It was the day of the community event, her debut platform to unveil Roots and Wings. Nervous yet electrified, she stepped up to the microphone, her heart pounding in her chest as the townspeople began to filter in. Each familiar face reminded her of why she had chosen this path. The sacrifices, the courage, the legacy she had resurrected from her grandfather's echoes. With her allies scattered throughout the crowd, Jenna felt an influx of energy coursing through her. Maya was busily arranging flower pots around the stage, each a statement of growth and resilience, while Lynn had painstakingly crafted a mural that mirrored the dual notions of rootedness and aspiration. It was a vibrant tapestry of colors and bustling life, depicting the flourishing trees that represented their community. As Jenna gazed at it, A flicker of doubt crept in. Would Harold's influence overshadow all of this? Raising her hand to quiet the murmurs, she drew in a breath and steadied herself. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice unwavering and clear. "Today, we stand at a crossroads, not just for our town, but for each of us as neighbors, friends, and fellow dreamers." There was a tangible silence as she continued. "The vision of Roots and Wings is to celebrate our heritage while boldly stepping into the future. We cannot and must not allow profit to eclipse the very spirit of our community." Her conviction deepened with each sentence. Jenna shared stories, the struggles and hopes of families like hers, the single mothers and fathers trying to reclaim their narrative from powerful figures who sought to exploit. She made connections with the crowd, using their stories to reflect the broader impact of her words. As she opened the floor for discussion, hands shot up almost instantly. What surprised Jenna most was the outpouring of support. People were eager, willing to voice their ideas, desires, and questions. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who felt marginalized, everyone who wanted to elevate their community on their own terms without compromising integrity. For the first time, Jenna's resolve crystallized as passions unfolded around her. Maya proposed community workshops focused on sustainable practices, while Lynn envisioned public art installations celebrating their heritage. The crowd buzzed with ideas, hurt mingled with hope, and discussions flourished without the looming pressure of Harold's influence. Yet a shadow passed over the event. Through the crowd, Harold entered, smug and calculating. Jenna felt a jolt of frustration. His presence threatened to unravel the cohesion they had built. He was here to disrupt, to diminish the community into a fragmented set of competing voices. Swallowing her nerves, she fought to maintain control. "Ah, Jenna," he called, each word dripping with sarcasm. "What a quaint little gathering you have here. Do you truly believe this fairy tale will build a future?" Jenna squared her shoulders, leaning into the confidence she had cultivated through weeks of preparation. "What you see as a fairy tale, Harold, is a movement grounded in collective belief. We all deserve a future built on collaboration, not exploitation." The crowd stirred as she addressed him, the weight of their shared conviction transforming them into a united front. Harold's irritation flickered at the edges of his composure, and he hesitated, jaw tightening. "Let me remind you, decisions like these are not made in idyllic settings," he sneered. "What happens when dreams collide with harsh realities?" "Reality cannot diminish aspiration," Jenna replied, her voice steady and firm. "Let's face it, you've thrived by sowing discontent amongst us, but the power lies here, in our unity." At this, the crowd erupted in supportive murmurs. Jenna could feel the shift. The symbolism of their movement against his exploitation couldn't be overstated. Each person here was a branch reaching toward the sun, drawing strength and nourishment from the roots they shared. Sweeping her gaze across the faces illuminated by passion, she pressed again, her tone rising with determination. "Harold represents instability. We represent what can flourish from honesty and resilience. Join with us. The real potential is here, among neighbors who've nurtured roots deep enough to weather any storm." Finally seeing the ground shift beneath him, Harold stepped back. The collective voices of the crowd rose, and he turned, retreating from the energy that now outshone his arrogance. A sense of triumph surged within Jenna, and, filled with newfound confidence, she stood tall. "You see," she smiled warmly at her community, "we can craft a future where our children grow up education-led, environment-friendly, and community-driven, rather than profit-centered." As their collective energy infused the air, the community pledged to support Roots and Wings. Their mission to create workshops, partnerships, and the determination needed to thrive beyond the limitations imposed by others. Jenna had not just achieved a personal victory, but had also sparked notable momentum for real change. They had risen together. Months later, Jenna looked out at a transformed community, once fractured, now thriving. Their stories told through murals, educational programs, and flourishing family businesses. She had emerged not just as a voice among many, but as a leader of a genuine movement, determined not to let any darkness extinguish the light they had collectively sparked. This was the tipping point she needed, a new narrative built on trust and courage. Her journey had transformed her, reshaping her doubts into solid tools of action. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself, a smile gracing her lips. "Now, this is your moment to take action. You need to subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support us in spreading more transformative journeys like Jenna's. Comment your thoughts and reactions about this incredible ending and what you think Jenna's next step should be. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness the power of personal growth. Don't wait even one more second. Support the movement and continue building a community of strength and resolve.